think we're good to go.
Everyone knows that. Alrighty, well, let's get started. So we will be talking about ending the feud between developers and marketers. A little bit tongue-in-cheek because there's not really a feud, but so we're going to kind of couch it in. So my name is Ron Northcutt. I'm a developer advocate at Acquia, and I'm joined by
Miriam Ahmad. I am a digital marketer at Acquia.
And all-around amazing person.
Likewise, Ron, likewise.
Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about kind of what is that age-old problem. How is it that marketers and developers tend to have a little friction from time to time, and then how we can find common ground, to sort of establish a line of communication and some collaboration. We're going to pause right in the middle to really double down on how you build a framework, composable framework that helps sort of establish that common ground, or reinforce that common ground, I should say. So that marketers and developers can really work well together, play to everybody's strengths. And then we'll dive back into how to use that common language once you have a great framework for your operation. And then how you sort of ride off into the sunset and continue to maintain a really positive, cross-functional collaboration, and to improve and iterate on sort of the common language that you'll be speaking at that point.
Good stuff.
All right, so what is the age-old problem? Well, this is probably a very familiar scenario, right? Marketer comes over to the developer like, hey, Ron, we've got a new program and we want to start promoting it next week. So could you just like whip up a microsite by Friday real quick?
And typically the developers, depending on their personality, is just going to be kind of going through all of those things in their head, like, what is this? Why is this a last minute thing? Do we even have a design? Do we have plans? When am I going to get what I need to do this? How's that going to work with our current tools? I've got all this other stuff I'm working on, and you're just kind of dumping this in my plate right now. It can lead to friction. So we're going to talk about how we can deal with that friction and overcome it.
Yes. So when you really kind of break down this scenario, it's a very familiar scenario. A lot of what's kind of charging the marketer, right? What's behind sort of their ask is that they need to move fast, and change happens quickly in marketing. They're rolling out, updates on a daily or even sometimes hourly kind of cadence. We always want flashy and engaging content. We want to be better than our competitors. We want to, go out the gates with really exciting marketing programs. And adopting new technology is something that is, a big part of marketing, right? Because you want to be cutting edge, and again, you want to differentiate your how do you go to market and how you are perceived by potential customers and existing customers. So, there's not always a lot of technical ability that goes into, sort of that mindset of how marketers are operating, but they do want to push boundaries, and they're accountable for timely content. So that can be a little challenging, right? Because they're coming to the table with, I want a lot of things, but I want it really quickly, and I don't necessarily understand your world. And then on the developer side.
On the developer side, we're really looking to try and maintain and keep things very steady. Definitely have a plan, hopefully a roadmap, if that's even possible. Some type of regular deployment cycle, but that deployment cycle can be, is usually going to be weeks, which is one of the challenges. If a marketer wants something done, the amount of work to do that may not be very much. I might be able to do it in minutes or even hours, but it could still take weeks for that to actually be deployed, because it's got to be part of that cycle. We want to make sure things are as stable as possible, as fast and as cacheable as possible. And we really want to be, because we have that focus on stability, we want to make sure we're using vetted technology. A lot of times developers who actually have the responsibility of keeping a site up can be a little bit more cautious about introducing change that could potentially be disruptive in a negative way. Developers usually have highly developed technical skills, which they need to do their job, but that can be challenging, because if there is additional context around why an ask from a marketer might be difficult, that marketer may not understand all of the nuance, and it can be difficult to talk through what all of that might be so that they can understand. And so that can be another point of friction. And typically developers are always trying to limit the scope. We're always pushing back on the ask, or always trying to put things in a box where they know that they can have a highly reliable commitment they can make. Because ultimately, a developer is going to be accountable for the stability and the governance of the site, making sure it's secure, making sure we have uptime, making sure that we have things working smoothly without any disruption. So it seems like there's a lot of conflict here.
Right,
but
right. So
not necessarily.
Right, absolutely. On the surface level, it does feel like those are opposing goals, right? Stability versus moving really quickly. But there's another way to look at this, right? So if you're really kind of taking the lens of trying to find common ground, it actually becomes a very different story very quickly, right? Marketers are used to working within a very structured campaign framework. Campaigns start with, a code that, is how we track that campaign's performance. It starts with definition of different channels. There's a lot of structure that goes into that plays into all of the reporting, which is massively important because that's how marketers are goaled and tracked. Campaign frameworks have a lot of interdependencies that span from automation and reporting, as I mentioned, all the way into sales alignment and how things flow over to sales. Automation also doesn't always work as simply as you would like. And a lot of times you run into scenarios where some things have to be manual or aren't as flexible as you need. And you're also working within the same kind of short timelines. And actually, much like in the relationship between marketers and developers, marketers are supporting sales and product and other, teams within the organization who also have moving targets. So a lot of times there's, sort of this assembly line, right, that's happening. And developers are part of that, but they're not the only ones that are kind of in that position of trying to move quickly because the needs of the business have sort of shifted, right? And all of this taken together, they're also required to get the work done properly and on time. And then when you look on the other side of the fence, there's a lot of similarities.
Exactly. Developers often have a lot of structure within the framework that they're using, whether it's Drupal or it might be React or some other set of tools and how they get their job done. So we're very similar in that way. And often these frameworks have interdependencies that go from environments and deployments all the way up to analytics and reporting. There's probably going to be several touch points where we need to make sure that there are, whether it's Google Tag Manager or other types of analytical tools, where we're pushing data back over into those marketing systems so that they can get what they want. There's another point of intersection there. And building stuff, as fun as it is or can be, it's not always very simple. You can't always go find the module you need or the component you want and just snap things together. Sometimes you got to get in, get your hands dirty, write some code, do testing, all of those other fun things. And that's something that can slow us down, just like the manual process can slow things down for marketers. And short timelines, again, always a reality. And so it's interesting to see how everyone involved in this has someone that's relying on them, but also someone that they're relying on. And so everyone's got somebody that's pushing on them. And so we can all kind of empathize with each other. But I think the really important thing is that we're all on the same team, we're on the same page. We're all trying to get focused on getting the work done properly and getting it done on time, not one time. That would be a Ron typo. But I think that's the place where if we start from, and instead of being face-to-face and pushing, if we're side by side moving forward, that's the place where we can see a lot of advancement.
Absolutely. And Matt, I love your comment. Marketers look at Drupal.org/project as a shopping cart without understanding the technical debt and of adding new contribution modules and terms of implementation and support. And I think that is the perfect segue to talk about the Composable Framework, because it's a good thing that marketers are interested in what's out there, right? But there is, a bigger conversation that needs to happen, and I think there is an opportunity, aligned roadmap, right? And partnership versus just like, oh, I picked out this stuff, now you go pay for it. So
Exactly.
With that, Ron's going to take us through what the Composable Framework is and how that can really support this relationship.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's key, if you haven't already you're probably going to start hearing this word composable more and more. It kind of goes hand in hand with this idea of low code. What a lot of us know is that Drupal is kind of the original low code framework for building things out. A lot of folks get their start as a site builder, never touching code, and just fall in love and dig deeper. I myself did that as well. So the good news is that all of this aligns with the way that Drupal wants to work. But taking a step back, one of the things we've seen is that there's this innovation gap. There's a gap between the experience that you're trying to get. You want it very modern, very flashy, very creative, but also kind of this either legacy architecture or legacy mindset. And a lot of people are kind of stuck in thinking about delivering solutions in old ways. And we got to break out of that mindset. And I'll talk a little bit about how I was able to do this on a team at Acqui that I was a part of, and how once we made that mental shift, we not only were able to deliver true innovation, but we were able to unlock a lot of additional resources without spending any more money or hiring any more people. And the trick to this is to change our mental paradigm to thinking about building a platform, building a composable platform. And the idea, just in a nutshell, is that we want to use Drupal to deliver this platform that is a low-code CMS that enables someone who's not a developer, who doesn't deploy code to do what they do, but enables someone to compose or assemble the different pieces to create whatever they want, whatever application or website or experience they're looking for. And again, a very, very simple shift, but it's a really, really important one. And this is actually just what Drupal already wants to do. This is already how it's built, right? When we have this, and this list of 4 items here actually comes from an industry analyst, Gartner, and how they talk about composability. And I want to be clear, this is not specific to Drupal. They talk about these 4 things as the way it should be done, at least today, right? Business user control of presentation. So that's having a site builder role where you can go in and you can add blocks and content and you can do things in the UI without deploying code. Packaged business capabilities, modules, themes, profiles, all of those fun things that Drupal does so well and has for a long time. A seamless user experience. That starts to get tricky because that's where we have to start getting involved in some of the other marketing tools that we have and how we're going to stitch different things together so that the user coming doesn't notice that they're moving between systems or they're getting a certain personalization here. They just know that for them, the experience is completely seamless and very comfortable. And then standardization at scale. And that really comes down to that idea of thinking about building a platform that's going, whether you're building one site or you're building 100, when you think in that way, you develop your systems in a different way. So ultimately what this allows us to do is to leverage more of the team. And that is possible by taking advantage of what Drupal already provides. And when we accomplish this, we can move much, much faster. We can go from ideation to delivery in, again, what the marketer's looking for, hours or days, and we get a much higher return on the investment. And the reason for that is because we're focusing on this concept of composability or low code. You might hear the term citizen developer. In Drupal speak, we call it a site builder, right? Someone who is enabled to go and create the things they want to create. Now, when we do this, we take this low code approach. What happens is that you can actually go much faster. And when you go faster, you're going to be saving time and money. So now that we're able to kind of split things up, the marketing team, the business user who cares the most about that presentation, about that experience they're creating, they have much, much more control over building that from the tools that the IT team has created. And what this does is this allows the IT team, the developing team, to actually focus on innovation, whether that's better CI/CD, more testing, whether that's additional web components that you're going to be putting in, additional integrations, testing and vetting some of those modules from Drupal.org to see which ones make sense to bring in. And so this is how we're able to kind of create space to actually do the innovation that everybody wants to do, and we always have such a hard time getting to. So for an analogy, it's kind of like if you were running backwards on a treadmill and you turned around and started running forwards. The tools don't change, the people don't change, but because you've shifted your perspective, you're now able to go twice as fast. And Miriam, do you have the name of the guy on the left here that's running backwards?
I don't.
Yeah, he's, I forget his name. This is actually he holds the world record in backwards running, no joke.
Aaron Yoder, is that right?
Aaron Yoder, yes. So he can run backwards for a mile in like under 6 minutes, which is ridiculous. So I would suggest that there are tons and tons of developers who are professional backwards runners and focus on building websites. But if you become a forward runner, you'll go twice as fast because you're thinking about building a platform.
And I think this is a great analogy because it helps marketers understand that you're basically trying to build a framework that gives you the ability and the flexibility to then weave things in much more easily, right? Like a new campaign comes up, exactly. We want new technology, we want new, things plugged into the site, we want to build new, experiences, whatever it is. You have that framework that allows you to easily not bolt things on, right? I think we can all probably relate to that kind of feeling, right? Of like, oh, I'm just trying to make this work. But actually weave it in and do that much more simply. And I think it's important if you feel like you're not there, like this concept's probably not new to a lot of developers, right? Like it's probably not a new idea. It's probably something you've been trying to accomplish or, striving to accomplish, but then with the day-to-day gets in the way. And I think it's important to take a pause and say, hey, I'm seeing a lot of campaigns or things we're trying to do that look like this. And honestly, we're not right now built to it feels like we're constantly in this sort of, trying to keep up, running backwards on the treadmill kind of place. And if we can find a way for us to carve out time to sort of restructure, our momentum coming out of that can really accelerate.
Excellent point, for sure.
Yeah.
So a composable architecture is really just a way of thinking about building things out, building a platform using reusable self-service tools. Remember, we want the business user, the marketer, to be able to control their own destiny and create what they want. And so when we think about building a platform versus building a website or an application, then we can work in parallel. We have our track as a developer, they have their track as the marketer, and all of the stuff that Drupal already has today gives us what we need. The ability to do structured data and media, tons of layout and display options, whether it's paragraphs or layout builder or using Site Studio with Acquia. We've got low-code configuration options that can be easily extended, and API first, so that we can tie into any of those tools that we need to integrate with.
Yeah, and this is not a new concept to marketers. So I think you'll find that these conversations will actually be a lot easier than you might suspect going into it, right? Because the composable engagement side of things, which is sort of like within the marketing automation realm, is very similar. Marketers are very used to working cross-functionally across several teams of specialized groups that deliver sort of pieces, right? That all kind of work together to build, a marketing program. So everywhere from personalizing, content or marketing engagements, distributed marketing, customer insights, website experiences, across the board, marketers are very used to working this way. So I think the one place that it seems to kind of stop in a lot of organizations is marketers and developers. It's like, oh, we do this part and you guys do that part. And I think there's definitely, with this framework, there's an opportunity to play to everybody's strengths. That's really what it is, right? I want to pause for one comment really quick. It's hard to convince the stakeholders to allow time to develop the platform because it's not directly linked to the goals or a direct user experience. I could argue that it is directly linked to the goals, but the challenge is helping them see that, right? If I can carve out X number of days or how much time I need to accomplish A, B, or C, when we go to add a new thing, this is how much less time it will take, right? So let's talk about what a year looks like then. In a year, we could do this much. In a year right now, we can do this much. You know, I think sometimes just taking your scenario and breaking it down into some tangible numbers or projections. Obviously, these are estimates, right? But it helps folks kind of understand where you're coming from a little bit better. And we'll go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So composable architecture helps us to kind of bridge that gap. And it really is about kind of the separation of concerns and letting us leverage the wider team. So if you have a composable platform, then developers and marketers, again, are working side by side in parallel instead of, you know, either face to face and fighting, or I'm waiting for you, you're waiting for me, and we're moving in a series. So everybody gets to move faster. And there's some really great results. You can have fewer bottlenecks. Immediate needs are not going to be as urgent. So you're actually going to buy yourself a little bit more time to do better planning. And you can do planning across the teams to talk about what does the platform need to have, not what do I need in the website for my needs today. Everyone gets to really maximize their contribution and have a lot more control over their piece. And then the website, like Miriam was saying, instead of being this whole other thing, it actually just fits into the broader marketing tech stack. And it becomes another tool that's used to compose or put things together, just like how the marketer wants to work anyway.
Yeah. So our conversation starts to look a little different when we take another look at it with this kind of framework, right? Because the marketer is assembling content, focus on the experience, building website, you know, using kind of self-service tools. And then the developer is really plugging into that much more seamlessly.
Yeah, and we're just providing the tools, the components and blocks, making sure the architecture is going to allow them to assemble things the way they want. Again, thinking platform instead of website, and taking the feedback from that team to really drive the roadmap of what we're trying to do, and focusing on innovation. So we get out of the business of trying to fix little bitty problems over here. We can focus on doing more visionary stuff and then enabling the marketing team to do what they want to do.
Right. So there's some tips and tricks that we found useful, and we're nearing the end here, so feel free to jump in and add questions or comments you have, and we'll try to address those as well. I think what's most important is really to first ask yourself, what is most important to this audience? Like, who am I talking to? What is it they're trying to achieve? What's most important to them? And then what's most important to, you know, your group of developers? Like, what is the message you want this person to walk away with? Once you kind of really have that narrowed in focus, it's a lot easier to kind of then think through how to, you know, conduct that kind of conversation, right? So you're focusing on helping find a solution with the current capabilities of your system. Using analogies is a great way to do this. Like the analogy Ron used earlier, the treadmills, right? It really helps folks understand sort of what situation you're in. And it's a great way to bypass kind of the complexity of trying to communicate technical issues, right? It's a little tough sometimes to come through, like think through an analogy, but it's a very effective communication tool. And then communicate often and set expectations appropriately. Try to get into a place where you have a seat at the table and you're not just waiting until like, oh, hey, we need to build this microsite, we need to do this thing to address, you know, what the needs of the business or the marketers are. Try to open the line of communication and keep up to date on marketing initiatives, because that gets you a seat at the table earlier on to say, oh, wait, that's going to be a bigger thing than you think, right? Let's maybe define the strategy a little differently at the onset so that you have some time to work on maybe the ideal situation and you are able to be part of the suggestion and part of the ideation of what can be done quickly. I'm going to take a look at comments here while you add to that, Ron.
Yeah, I think that the big thing here is just making sure that there's just better planning. Hopefully you have a roadmap. Hopefully that's being driven by discussions with marketing. And the other nice thing is, you know, there's always going to be limits within the system. But if the marketing team is on board and they know how to make best use of what you have today, they can actually become a really good ally in figuring out where we're going tomorrow. Hey, if we make this change, it'll make my life a little bit easier. We can do that pretty quickly. It just makes it much better when we can communicate.
Yes, 100%. I'm loving all the feedback here. I'm glad you guys are finding this helpful. I did like this one comment. You can end up with a battle with designers over cookie cutter websites. So that's more education about theming, 100%. I think it's really important, and I'm really glad that someone called this out, for designers and developers to work hand in hand. Because, you know, and I manage, you know, developers, and I'm constantly making sure design and development is working together, because little tweaks to the design can happen that will accelerate the timeline, right, without sacrificing the quality of the design. And so that also definitely needs to be a partnership and just an open line of communication.
Yeah, the one thing I would say on that from the developer standpoint as well is that's a really great conversation to have about configuration. So you might have a block that puts a hero on a page and it does things very simply, but you can actually go in and add configuration for, you know, the size of the heading, whether it's the text overlay is left or right, how much opacity there is. Those things are all entirely possible within the system. And that's how you can actually provide a lot more configuration and kind of be able to break out of everything being cookie cutter, but still have the governance of things are going to look well and work well together.
Yes. Yep. So this conversation looks really different. You know, hey, we're going to need to do this thing. And, you know, if you're really thinking about, okay, like, how would we make this work within where we're at and what components we have? And I wonder if we're going to have some new feature requests, that kind of thing. It's a much more positive conversation. And ultimately, you know, again, plays to everybody's strengths.
So we have questions. If we've got a few more minutes, we can take some of those. But I also just want to make sure everybody knows that if you have time, find some time to come by the Acquia booth, because you can grab me and I'm happy to talk about what we did on our team and how we were able to go a lot faster and deliver more value to everyone. But actually, Miriam, you've got a couple of cool sessions in the booth coming up that are related to this.
We have one just after this where we will have Ask Us Anything about how we just recently rebuilt Acquia.com. And we are using this composable framework. So, you know, if you have more questions, please join us. We'd love to kind of hear what you're curious about, and total transparency, give you kind of some feedback on what our experience was, what we learned, what went well, what didn't. We'll also have a session about this topic of, you know, how to really get marketers and developers to communicate well, specifically around how to approach a conversation around rebuilding your website. So there were a lot of questions around that. Please join us for that session. We will have a really open forum, and I'm really excited for that one, just to kind of talk through how we approached that conversation and how it went, and some tips and tricks and to make that successful.
Yeah, it looks like we have just like 1 minute left. So the thing I just want to leave everybody with is that this is not a big shift in what you do. It's the way you think and the way you work with your the other parts of your organization to get things done. And again, I just want to reiterate for everybody, we're in such a great spot because Drupal as a framework already provides us with everything we need to do this. And we've just, as you're seeing through the initiatives and through the other talks, how people are pushing the boundaries, just making it better and better every day.
Yes, 100%. So there was one question on where to find the booth schedules.
I believe that it's in the booth. We have that listed, but we could actually, if you show up in the Acquia booth, and if nothing else, ask for Kathy.
Kathy just added the booth schedule in for us. So, like,
of course she did, because she's amazing in all the places.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
I think we had one other question. See if we can get it quickly enough. What's your experience with getting marketers or BPs on board with meeting accessibility needs? For example, we shouldn't really have that flashing banner. I honestly think that it's really important to be honest and candid about that. It's always useful with marketers, I think, to show tangible feedback. So, articles and other best practices that you can provide will help them sort of understand that this isn't just like an opinion, right? This is really a best practice, and see where that goes. If you're still getting pushback there, I mean, maybe it's a good idea to try to find some other examples of, hey, this is what it would look like, and this is what feedback could look like, and that kind of thing. But I imagine that really just sort of framing that up as here's best practice, here's why we shouldn't do that. That should, do the trick.
Good question.
think I see any other questions. Thank you all. This was, I loved all the feedback and the questions everybody had. Thank you for joining us. And again, please, if you're able to come and join us at our open sessions, and we'll talk more.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy DrupalCon.
Bye.